recent claims made by the UFO whistleblower David Grush include implications that there are biologics associated with UFO crashes and retrieval programs, indicating that some factions of the government have biologics associated with these craft. Now, those claims are rather extraordinary, rather scintillating, rather intriguing, and I found those claims to be interesting in the context of Leslie Kean's description of why she may not have included some more of those sensational claims within her original write-up of the situation with Blumenthal in the debrief, where they introduced the UFO whistleblower. So what do those claims have to do with alien abduction? What do those claims have to do with missing time? How do those claims relate to the dreamlike nature of extraterrestrial and non-human intelligence contact that I've been exploring through this channel here? So this chapter addresses those questions. This chapter is likely the most challenging bit of writing I have done myself, and probably will challenge some of you. I had an interesting conversation this morning, which arose out of a very interesting dream this morning. So this is why I am doing this recording. It is to serve as a sort of documentation of my inquiry at this moment. So I wanted to read through the chapter, to share it with the people who are following me here on YouTube, and to read through it so you can see my face and you can understand that I authentically believe the research that I'm putting forward is relevant to contemporary dialogue. I believe that the research that I have done is relevant to our understanding of our place in the cosmos, our understanding of the possibilities of this world, particularly related to alien abduction and UAP crash retrievals, and also contact with the non-human world. So I wanted to provide some context before I read it. I want to say, right, in this writing, I will challenge some of the things that the experiencer community, the abductee community has held dear, like the sanctity of Dr. John Mack as a wonderful researcher who we can rely upon as a unquestioned voice about the nature of these experiences. I know I have been, I love going, John Mack, head of Harvard psychiatry, looked into these things. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He must know what he's talking about. And then I actually looked at some of his early claims from around 1990 to 1995. No, he's pretty much as confused as anyone about this subject matter. So I'm going to be talking about that. And that's a little challenging. I'm going to be talking about the nature of identity in these experiences. And I'm just warning you, I'm not, the writing I do is from that I'm presenting is from more or less a scholarly point of view. So I'm grounding it in references, in materials that have been found in archives. So you can go do your inquiry and look at the context and perhaps even say, no, you got this wrong, actually. If you looked further in the John E. Mack archive at the Archives of the Impossible in Rice University, or you looked further on the Internet Archives, then I may have, then you might illuminate something for me. And I would love that, because I really think this conversation around UFOs, contact with non-human intelligences, biologics, it really needs to be grounded actually in all modes of inquiry. So my primary argument is that we need to ground this inquiry in dreams, actually, in the dreaming phase of consciousness, and apply those epistemologies, apply the ethics of dream work to this field. But I will also advocate for a balance, right? For if there's claims for physical evidence, we actually need to see those physical evidences. One of the more surprising things for me as I track the research surrounding alien abduction was this kind of recurrent claim. There's overwhelming physical evidence, And I have looked through a lot of boring material and a lot of gruesome material to tell you that there is not actually a lot of physical evidence for alien abduction. That claim, as best as I can tell, is founded on the researcher Bud Hopkins, who carried around with him, seems a folder of weird body marks and said, I think this is related to abduction. Can you explain this? Well, abduction must be real. So that was sort of the nature of physical evidence at that point. And I've really tracked it. I looked through the quarterly reports of the Fund for UFO Research, which was doing a lot of the abduction research at the time, and giving money to Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs to test residues, right? And nothing was ever conclusive. And so, and they also did that to support these best-selling authors in their daytime TV appearances, right? So there's like a group of scientists that is saying, we'll support you to make these wild claims, but the evidence isn't there, right? So it's like, that's part of what I was looking at, and that's why I'm talking about it. And that's a little challenging because we have built identities of abductee, contactee, experiencer on the work of some experiencer researchers, John Mack, Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, Dolores Cannon even, and these are kind of identities that are becoming crystallized. And so when I present this research, I expect that there may be some disillusioning of identity here. I know I had to go through that. I go, oh, John Mack is not the saint I thought he was. He is a human researcher performing research about humans. It's messy, it's complicated. And I think that's fine, but we need to be clear about that. So I'm going to read this because I'm naming people. I'm saying, hey, there was a thing that happened in the 1990s that's relevant today. There's a thing that happened in alien abduction literature or research where the group of researchers, I say, stepped across a line from science to pseudoscience. And they publicized that to the mental health community. So in 1991, John Mack, Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, Ron Westrom, John Carpenter, Robert Bigelow, and the Prince of Liechtenstein sort of got together and made this publication, the Unusual Personal Experiences publication. And I will just actually try to find that really quick because that's actually really wonderful to pull up. So they basically... here we go. They basically, let's see if we can get this. They make this publication, right? So this is 1991, Unusual Personal Experiences. As you'll find, it's an analysis of the data from 3 national surveys conducted by the Roper organization, which is well respected. We believe that makes sense. The data they did seems good. It's copyrighted by Bigelow Holding Corporation, Las Vegas, 1992. Has this really great, look, there's a clinical description of the UFO abduction syndrome. It's by PhDs, it seems credentialed, right? So that sort of thing. And then as you read this, right, you go, okay, 6,000 people. Then there is some information around it being published to 100,000 mental health practitioners, right? So that they're saying, hey, John Mack is saying, hey, this survey is important. Mental health practitioners need to pay attention to it. There's trauma associated with it, right? The fact that the trauma, whatever its source, is not over, i.e. abductees cannot prevent its reoccurrence or protect their children or other loved ones from its effect. John Mack, head of Harvard Psychiatry, wrote this, had it sent out to 100,000 mental health practitioners who then may have informed their mental health practice based upon the notion that 2% of the population may be powerless victims to alien abduction narratives because of the overwhelming physical evidence associated with this event. That is what they say here. That's what they're saying here. And I go, where is that physical evidence? You show it to me. I need to see it. And I actually have gone through. I go, okay, this is really important. I need to understand this. This is why I've been looking at body marks. I go, these are evidence either of communication, of something else, or of medical artifact. Let's just figure that out. So in the course of my research, right, I write this book, Galithog the Gray's Field Guide to Anomalous Geometry. I like this subtitle, For Mature Terrans at Every Level of Hybridization Who Seek Eternal Ascension from the 3D Enslavement Matrix, or at least peace and insight regarding alien abduction, offered through the new oracular science of ET communication through geometry, thus introducing the galactic art of geometrancy, given to the Sol system on the first day of the Unity year by the authority of the Enochian Angels, Ashtar Space Command, and the Zeta Reticulan Abduction Corps. This is sort of written in the voice of a dream character. Tall Gray was visited my dreams, have claimed responsibility for anomalous geometric body marks and other sort of shamanistic events, let's say, like animal embodiments or UAP sightings. So I did this work as a sort of, it's based in integral theory, so most of this book actually, let's get to it, is sort of like I cover this prologue that I'm about to read to you. But then I go into the introduction about, this is my literature review of body marks as physical evidence for alien abduction. I say, hey, there's not a lot of data out there. I need to collect some. So I develop some methods about how to collect this. I go, okay, I'm going to collect dozens of body marks across multiple different types, all associated with extraterrestrial non-human intelligence contact intuitions. I'm going to channel a chapter on it from Galithog. It's going to be really great and stuff. I want to just zoom in because I'm just showing you how much data I've sort of collected on this and going, okay, here's geometry. I really believe it's communication, right? This is one of Hopkins' scoop marks that he presented on. Here's a geometric analysis or observation. And I go for the next 100 pages in this book like this, covering dozens of body marks, right? This is one of the more anomalous ones. Bud Hopkins says, hey, this is alien abduction. And this has been on the top of alien abduction symptom lists for a decade since then. But actually it is from a suction cover of a hot tub. So someone had a hot tub and sat next to this thing that sucked their skin in, and it created this bruising pattern. Isn't that interesting? But both the experiencer and Bud Hopkins pieced it together that aliens must have stolen their body, the experiencer's body, left this mark on for some unknown purpose, and then wiped their memory of it, right? And that's actually the physical evidence that we have for alien abduction. And I'm really passionate about this because in the 1990s, I grew up, I had extraordinary dream experiences that I could only make sense of through the lens of alien abduction. And that's just not the case. And it's still affecting me to this day. And I think it's obscuring a very real phenomenon. And we'll get to that shortly. But I just wanted to show you all of this. Wow, that's a lot of research. Like, I've done a lot of research about alien abduction body marks because they are the only sole source of physical evidence we have outside of the alleged biologics that Grush talked about in association with these UAP crashes. So I'm saying I authentically looked into the evidence thinking I would find some geometric communications, and I actually do believe that. But it revealed to me that there is this research experience that needs to be discussed and is really important to discuss. And so I'm discussing that. I've written about it. I'm reading that now because I'm raising some concerns that I hope will be transformative to the experiencer at the abductee, contactee community. And I want that community to know that NHI contact, non-human intelligence contact, is actually, in my opinion, a thing. It's real. It's not documentable in the same way as scientific events are, because these are not events in space-time per se. And we'll talk about that further. But it's really just, I really want everyone to know and see my face when I'm delivering this, that I actually believe that the entire research group, even if I'm passionate about it, that John Mack, Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, Bigelow, Prince of Liechtenstein, actually, to my eyes, were exploring passionately this subject that's very interesting, that's very curious to me. I don't think there was ill intent. I think this was a mistaken kind of, in the wake of giants, right? There is gigantic impact of their movements, right? And these men are giants, and they've moved in a way that I don't think they even realize how impactful it was. And I think everyone's just sort of moved on from the connection of alien abduction and these notions in the 1990s. And it's like, it doesn't need to be addressed, and yet it's still within my heart to look into. It's still in my heart to understand. And I believe that actually this notion of alien abduction and the notion of crash retrievals and this whole conspiracy thing is obscuring a very real phenomenon that should be studied. I'm saying that the kind of weird UFO only sort of no cryptids talking about no poltergeist, that's too far, right? That sort of thing is harmful. And it is challenging to our population to really work with. Because as, and I'll let the text actually introduce itself and these notions. I needed this to be candid. I need this to be sort of clear expression. I need to document a sort of dream experience I had this morning. I woke up from this dream with a really strong knowledge, right? So I was in a forest, I was in a city, I'm in this sort of walking down the street, and the whole experience feels like Morpheus and Neo walking down in the Matrix, where Morpheus says, "Oh, that woman in the red dress, it should be a clue that you're in the Matrix," or whatever, something like that. There are these two robed beings that looked like aliens from Prometheus. They were green, they were hooded, robed, sort of walking down the street, and they felt like people pretending to be actors in a play that has sort of invaded the play, pretending to be actors. And I go, oh, they don't belong. They're alien to this dream. Let's zoom in. And as I did that sort of lucid insight inquiry, they reset the dream. Same thing happened. Reset the dream. Same thing happened. And then they put me back in my body from that dream state, right? No wake up train. It's just sort of there with the knowledge that the two green beings will authenticate a message for me. And I go, oh, that must be Greg from the Higher Side Chats. I talked to him about dream shamanic experiences. I bet he's dreaming about green beings right now. And then it's like, oh, but maybe it's Robin who I'm talking to later today about this book, and maybe they'll have green people in. I actually watched a video by a man named Stephen Greenstreet, and he referenced another man named Greenwald. I forget his first name, and they have been working together to uncover this kind of UFO religion conspiracy thing that is at the heart of the 2017 New York Times article, that's at the heart of David Grush and all of his UFO claims. And I go, oh, Greenstreet, green people in the city. And then I looked up my dream and it was like, actually, I was in the forest too. So Greenwald, the green forest, the green hill, that sort of thing. So we've got these two green beings, right, in this one message of UFO religion. It says, right, Kirkpatrick said, no, like he's bringing forward this information. At the same time, interestingly, Coltaire is starting to call Kirkpatrick Voldemort, right? This is like so strange in terms of what's happening. So I take this message that the understanding is the UFO religion, as understood through this sort of weird, crazy kind of well-funded, perhaps misguided science relating to Skinwalker Ranch and poltergeist activity and things like that. All of that is really at the heart of the UAP crash retrieval. So that confirmed the message to me that they were on the right track, right? Interestingly, right, it's from a dream message of alien beings, right? Like I'm working with my dreams. It's an omen, tells me there that authenticated the message. Like, okay, this is actually what I believe is happening too, primarily because I've been doing this research independently, right? Like I referenced their work, the New York Times Post here. I was just sort of like, hey, there's something else going on in this experience. So I thought that perhaps I would read this now in that context, understanding that perhaps this bit of information wants to be out there in the world. And the reason why I'm sharing it now is so that I can personally present it with my persona to say the phenomenon is real, that your contact with whatever you think is contacting you is real, but is coming through ways that are more like religion or dreams than science, and that's okay. I'm here to say that yes, we're pointing some light on the characters of Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, and their related abduction researchers. Leslie Kean was the partner or companion of Bud Hopkins as he died. Ralph Blumenthal wrote the book on John Mack. And so I'm saying that narrative, those saints of the community are actually human, just like you and I are. And therefore, the kind of knowledge and claims that need to come, that are coming up and out of that situation, need to be filtered through that experience. So that's why I'm doing this work. That's why it's taken me 20 minutes to introduce it, because it's awkward, it's challenging, and I want to let you know it's okay. That I want to let you know, like, yeah, I'm saying alien abduction and our notion of it is influenced by this perhaps UFO religion conspiracy, and yet your experiences were real, and yet they tell you something about yourself and the world, and yet even though there are likely no biologics hanging out in the Pentagon or something like that, maybe if they are, maybe they are. I don't know. I can't say, but I'm offering this reflection to let you know that something really is happening there, but you have to rely on your own inner perception, your own understanding, your own way to connect with it. So without further ado, let me read you the prologue of Galathog the Gray's Field Guide to Anomalous Geometry. What is the legacy of the UFO abduction syndrome defined in 1992 by an extraordinarily funded research effort between Robert Bigelow, Hans Adam II, Prince of Liechtenstein, and 3 best-selling abduction authors? In 1992, the alien abduction research community defined the UFO abduction syndrome on the basis of the 1991 Unusual Events Survey by Roper Organization. They concluded that 2% of the population and their children were powerless victims of alien abduction for unknown purposes like horrific genetic harvests resulting in a lifetime of trauma. The group mailed 100,000 mental health professionals a booklet titled Unusual Personal Experiences that publicized the Unusual Events Survey, which was designed to appear like a clinical science paper, but was written by a history professor, a modern artist, and a sociologist. Although it was forwarded by the prominent Harvard psychiatrist, Skeptics noted that John Mack already signed a $200,000 book deal on the subject. The group organized the Abduction Study Conference at MIT, specifically targeting the mental health community to make aware of their discoveries. The definition and its propagation were directly funded by Robert Bigelow and Hans Adam II, Prince of Liechtenstein, through donations totaling more than $250,000, around $560,000 today. It was orders of magnitude more than any other grant administered at the time through the Fund for UFO Research. Like many before me, I argue that the funding of unusual personal experiences in the 1992 abduction conference was based upon pseudoscientific claims, which may be interpreted as the true conspiracy behind alien abduction. It must be noted that I am using the word conspiracy in its rhetorical and not legal sense for several reasons. One, it connects the research agenda of the group with popular alien abduction narratives such as from the X-Files. Two, the word highlights the hidden nature of the funding and research agenda. And three, it raises the question of the potential harmful implications of the promotion of clinical definitions outside of the normal mechanisms of clinical science. I argue that the definition of the UFO abduction syndrome is pseudoscience because it appears in the guise of clinical science, but was A, written by non-clinical and non-scientifically trained researchers, B, grounded their arguments in folklore studies, and C, relied upon an unconscious appeal to authority of so-called abduction body marks to justify the physical abduction hypothesis over dream-related phenomena. However, I do not believe the group intentionally caused harm. Therefore, the term conspiracy is inappropriate except as an explicitly defined rhetorical device. I will use the term abduction study group to refer to these individuals. Further, I argue that the same group may be active in contemporary UAP crash recovery narratives, which may turn out to be as substantial as alien abduction. As will be demonstrated, there is a chain of relationships and activities that tie all major players of the alien abduction research group with the UAP craft recovery narrative. What is the legacy of the UFO abduction syndrome? I will answer that question by providing historical context from the Fund for UFO Research quarterly reports published on the Internet Archives, letters between the group members held within the John E. Mack archives within the archives of the Impossible at Rice University, and a scholarly review of abduction-related literature. I argue that the legacy involves major impacts on society that may be considered harmful. My argument is more complex than most other critics of alien abduction or recovered memory. I am an experiencer of the phenomenon. I have trained in hypnosis. I hold an MA in East-West psychology, a BA in classical liberal arts, and I'm a PhD student in integral noetic science at an accredited institute, and my explicit focus is on ET-NHI contact and dreams. I hypothesize that there is an NHI visitation phenomena that the Unusual Events Survey accurately described, but one that is primarily psychical and secondarily physical. On the mental or psychic levels, the NHI may appear in a dream that it may control, which may explain screen memories, missing time, Oz factor, prophetic visions, similarity to OBEs, and clear derivation from imagination or science fiction. On the physical level, the NHI may appear as structured light capable of self-movement and transformation, but typically as an orb or a figure. I hypothesize that the orb is capable of radiation, which may explain body marks and other trace evidence. The precedent of dream apportation, which is the teleportation of objects from dreams to waking, may be a relevant precedent to genetic harvest or UAP metamaterial. Therefore, my argument calculates the impact of their legacy relative to the possible reality that the phenomena is exactly as the experiencers reported and required no expert explanation through extraordinary hypotheses like alien abduction. The abduction study group's activity in 1989 through 1992 defined a clinical syndrome for mental health professionals outside of normal science using the credentials of John Mack as Harvard professor of psychiatry and the financial backing of Bigelow and Liechtenstein to bypass the checks and balances of science and directly engage mental health professionals. I argue that their message redefined the natural and enriching activities of shamanic dreaming and OBE as something unnatural and disempowering. I argue that Mack's therapeutic recommendations, based upon the uncredentialed work of Hopkins and Jacobs, may be as impactful as the recovered memory techniques used in the memory wars controversy involving false accusations of sex abuse based upon the myth of repressed memory. Consequently, the entire field of UAP crash retrieval and disclosure may simply be a distraction from the underlying phenomena in the same way that alien abduction hypothesis may have been a distraction from understanding the underlying NHI contact phenomena. I will point out that many of the people credited for bringing UAP disclosure to the public are the same that brought abduction to the mental health community. Bigelow through the participation in both events, Kean through her connections to Hopkins, and Blumenthal through his biography of Mack. I will argue that a 2011 article published in the Journal of Cosmology indicates that Bigelow and the Prince may have considered funding dream telepathy experiments similar to remote viewing to find the location of crashed UFOs. To my eyes, all the players in the abduction study group acted out of passionate curiosity in the phenomena with positive intent. Both Bigelow and the Prince had family stories of UFO visitation that they were driven to understand. Mack, Hopkins, and Jacobs believed in experiencers enough to bravely dedicate their career to the subject. They all did something no one else would: research and discuss extraordinary tales of ET-NHI visitation that the materialist worldview denied as anomalies. I grew up in the 1990s, and my nightmares were directly scripted through by their research through the television programs it inspired. Rather than 2 decades of peaceful OBEs and gentle visitations of light shimmers or orbs, I experienced traumatizing fear of aliens and their technology, said to leave marks upon the body and wipe the mind of memory. I commend their efforts, and I am grateful for their courageous actions. I bring light to their actions to inspire them to imagine a narrative that empowers, not victimizes, all dreamers everywhere. The topic of alien abduction has been raising powerful questions since its first mainstream reports in the 1950s and 1960s. It became a serious subject of scientific research through the 1980s, through the efforts of the Fund for UFO Research, in addition to MUFON and the other ones, which supported many of notable researchers, including Bullard, Jacobs, Hopkins, and Mack. Bullard compiled a rich set of abduction tales using his craft as a folklore researcher, which chronicled the development of abduction stories in the 20th century and before. The research activities came into public view in the 1990s after a series of conferences and a survey funded by Bigelow and an anonymous donor, later to be identified as the Prince of Liechtenstein. Bigelow is associated with contemporary UAP disclosure because he owns Skinwalker Ranch, where $22 million was spent on UAP cryptid and poltergeist research on behalf of the U.S. government. I argue that the 1990s Unusual Personal Experiences booklet is the publication that defined alien abduction as a clinical syndrome, which will be explored after a brief literature review. The 1990s were dominated by 3 abduction researchers. 1. Hopkins, the modern artist turned best-selling abduction writer. 2. Jacobs, the Temple University history professor turned hypnotherapist and best-selling abduction writer. And 3. Mack, the Pulitzer Prize-winning former head of Harvard Psychiatry and best-selling abduction writer. The prevalence and power of the alien abduction hypothesis is functionally tied to the myth of repressed memory, which suggests that hypnosis, therapy, and other means of interlocution may recover memories that have been repressed from the conscious mind. The myth spawned the memory wars controversy regarding the validity of recovered memory as criminal evidence, of which alien abduction was a footnote. Loftus and Ketchum demonstrated that memory, especially recovered memory, is unreliable and requires additional evidence to support conclusions. In their 1994 book, they describe numerous cases of families destroyed by criminal accusation of incestuous sexual abuse, often with satanic ritual or fantastic themes. They described how therapy and hypnosis may produce a suggestible and imaginative state of consciousness, observing that the narratives often satisfy some other psychological need. In the same year, Mack published his definitive work, Abduction, which relied upon hypothesis informed by hypnosis. In 1996, Lin and Kirsch applied similar reasoning as Loftus to the alien abduction narrative. In 2002, Clancy et al. Studied memory distortion in self-identified abductees, eventually linking abductees with schizotypy through higher rates of hypnotizability and proneness to false recall. Schizotypy is defined as a personality disorder involving magical thinking and eccentric behavior, with a prevalence rate of around 4%. Mack and Clancy appear to agree that alien abduction narratives may arise from spiritual yearnings, observing that the tales may serve as a social function within society that has rejected spirituality and religion. Even though science has demonstrated that hypnosis is an unreliable means of memory recovery and that abductees may be schizotypal people who have mistaken sleep paralysis dreams for reality, the field of alien abduction research sporadically continued into the 2000s, supporting the mainstream media fascinations with the subject. Bigelow repeated his 1991 poll in 1998, which was repeated for the Sci-Fi Channel in 2002. It appears that the myth of repressed memory is deeply embedded within culture, as 58% of clinical psychologists believe in it, despite law courts' rejection of its reliability. Mack was killed by a drunk driver in 2004, leaving only Hopkins and Jacobs to represent abduction research. In 2011, the Skeptical Inquirer announced the implosion of abductology, precipitated by an article written by Rainey, an award-winning documentarian and Hopkins' former third wife. Rainey presented testimony regarding Hopkins and Jacobs' client, as well as her companionship with Hopkins, that clearly demonstrated that the researchers compromised their research integrity. Given that the 2 previous decades of abduction research has produced minimal physical evidence, direct original research on the topic seemed to evaporate. However, abductions are still a topic of conversation. Jacobs published another book in 2015, and hypnotherapists continue to offer regression hypnosis for alien abduction, and abduction reports are still collected by MUFON. In 2018, Hernandez et al. Published a survey of several thousand experiencers of ET contact, although they explicitly rejected testimony from dreams and hypnosis. Blumenthal published a contemporary abduction narratives that described abductees as experiencers of a variety of phenomena, which traces the emerging experiencer identity back to the abductee identity of the 1990s through abduction research. UFO and ET contact research shifted in 2017 with the New York Times article on the secret ATIP program, through which the U.S. government spent $22 million to study UAPs and other supernatural phenomena, in part at the Bigelow-owned Skinwalker Ranch. Around that time, the terminology of UFOs became UAPs, ETs became NHIs, and abductees became experiencers. It appeared that these topics were now acceptable to discuss in mainstream media and whispered in the halls of academia. Blumenthal and Kean transformed the field again by introducing Grush, the so-called UAP whistleblower and former intelligence official who testified before Congress that there is a secret UAP recovery and re-engineering program hidden throughout the military and aerospace industries. There is a strong cultural expectation that governmental UAP disclosure will confirm the reality of the phenomena and therefore will transform society, likely enabling public scientific research and free market exploitation of the recovered technology. Consider Dr. Nolan's claims through the Soul Foundation. There is an inherent paradox within the notion of alien abduction experience. On the one hand, they are clearly dreamlike because of their typical timing around dreams, lack of memory, and the presence of fantastic beings. On the other hand, experiencers testify to their reality. When researchers like Bullard, Hopkins, Jacobs, and Mack considered the possibility of their dreamlike nature, they all turned to A, the consistency of content and themes across disconnected individuals, and B, the presence of body marks or other trace evidence. The consistency of themes is only support for the physical alien abduction hypothesis within a materialist worldview. The experiences like shared dreaming or OBEs may help explain the consistency of themes. The use of anomalous body marks as physical evidence for supernatural encounters is the subject of my book, Galathog the Gray's Field Guide to Anomalous Geometry, which surveyed dozens of body marks associated with ETNHI intuitions and several body mark types, including those researched by Hopkins. Missing time and abduction body mark research. I entered the field of NHI UAP research in 2020 through 3 different modes of inquiry. First, I supported the CE5 HICE communities by developing report forms, analysis tools, community software, and reports about HICE experiences. Second, I wrote a chapter on lucid dreaming for a Greater Reality, which was a 4-volume book published by the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute as a follow-up to the Beyond UFOs survey that presented the free survey data. The book put forward the hypothesis that consciousness is a primary or greater reality and that humans make contact with that greater reality through the contact modalities, which are envisioned as different spokes on the same wheel. The contact modalities include near-death, out-of-body, mediumistic, extraterrestrial, and otherwise supernatural experiences. Third, I offered regression hypnosis for missing time experiencers with a psychospiritual framing based in dream work, which culminated in my publication of Missing Time Found. My inquiry has been directly guided by my dreams. In addition to their scholarly literature reviews and theories, my books are a documentation of my dream interactions with ETNHI characters who may actually be ontologically distinct entities. My entire inquiry into body marks is inspired by my supernatural interactions with these characters. They, not me, have injected body mark research into my missing time research by marking my body, inspiring mystery, and instructing me on its interpretation through geometry, which is a journey described in the book, Galathog the Gray's Field Guide to Anomalous Geometry. Body marks demonstrate some paradoxes of alien abduction. On the one hand, abduction research has been conclusively discredited by false memory research, see Loftus or Lin and Kirsch, and researcher controversy, see Rainey or Schaefer. The extraordinary claims of physical alien abduction, defined as the UFO abduction syndrome in 1992, are not supported by defensible methods, in my opinion, as an experiencer, certified hypnotist, and researcher. Therefore, the claims of physical alien abduction are only supported by the trace evidence of residue materials, implants, and body marks. However, no major research has been done on such material. In scanning the FUFOR reports from 1984 to 1992, I noted that they tested a small implant with an unknown researcher and the testing of residue collected by Jacobs. Leaked NDIS memos, that's the National Institute for Discovery and Science funded by Bigelow, suggest that Kit Green has conducted medical studies, although I have no additional supporting evidence besides hearsay. Additionally, there has been research into alien abduction implants by Lear that describe the implants as highly strange phenomena. Interestingly, the book was sponsored by Bigelow's NIDS. Skeptical scientists note that the descriptions of implants by Lear may be explained by natural reactions to foreign bodies, and that Lear's research materials have been mysteriously lost, preventing future study. Both body marks and implant epistemologies clearly suffer from confirmation bias, in which the researcher searches for something to confirm their hypothesis, and finds it because the world has many anomalies and much variation, not because the hypothesis is accurate. Therefore, abduction research relies upon faith claims that feel certain and clear because of the natural yet unexplained authority of fantastic sexual trauma narratives substantiated by epistemologies developed in medieval witch hunts, which is termed carnal knowledge. In other words, I must follow the conclusions of Mack in 1999, Clancy, Hernandez et al., Pasolka, and many others that claims related to human abduction phenomena are primarily spiritual, religious, or faith-based claims. However, humans are transrational creatures not limited by bounds of good science, as demonstrated by the fact that the myth of repressed memory is thriving today within clinical psychology. Just as dreams may arise from personal attitudes and intentions, so too may waking experiences of dreamlike phenomena may arise from personal attitudes and intentions. If the alien abduction experience is a real phenomenon, but one that is co-created or co-creative with personal beliefs like dreams and OBEs, then alien abduction research may have caused the amplification of the phenomena through an undiscovered feedback loop. Therefore, we must dive into body mark research to resolve the paradox of alien abduction research. Alien abduction body mark research has focused on the documentation of anomalies. Body mark photos and data are often noted in abduction reports as anomalies. For example, in the 1961 Hills case or the 1967 Falcon Lake incident. Bullard observed their prevalence in abduction reports and their similarity to fairy and witch's mark, which Vallée also noted. While many individual cases have included body mark data, there is little research that considers the body mark phenomena as a whole. Several abduction-related websites present compilation of body mark photos, such as Alien Jigsaw. I have found one publicly available recording of Hopkins' 2004 lecture to MUFON that presented a dozen or so cases. Galithog the Gray's Field Guide to Anomalous Geometry presents the only print catalog of body mark data in association with ETNHI contact intuition, although most cases do not imply alien abduction. The authority of body marks as evidence is derived from religious, not scientific claims. Therefore, it must be dealt with both a religious and a rational approach, which is one of the reasons why I used the religious and spiritual methodology of trans-channeling in my integral research practice of data collection and geometric analysis to integrate rational perspectives. Physical evidence for the supernatural as literature. My comprehensive body mark research yielded a major insight, which is that body mark and abduction reports are intertextual literature that are generated by the dynamic between the experiencer and interlocutor, which derive their meaning from reference to authoritative original reports of supernatural conjecture supported by the documentation of anomalies. Intertextuality refers to the interplay of ideas within literature, which is pointed to by the connection between the Hills description of aliens and the Outer Limits TV presentation of the same alien type before their hypnotic recall of their encounter. An interlocutor is a social role for one who questions an experiencer to generate a public testimony, such as an investigator, researcher, hypnotist, or priest. Every report of a supernatural event occurs through the dyad, otherwise we would not be aware of the event. An authoritative original report is a document that inspires other reports. For example, the target symbol mark phenomenon has several original reports within several different research communities that collected dozens of similar marks, which inspired Vallée to conclude it was a global unexplained phenomena, although it is highly congruent with hairdryer burns as discussed by Metabunk. Even though alien abduction and body mark reports are intertextual literature, which are clearly influenced by science fiction and pseudoscience, the NHI ET contact phenomena appears to be real at some level. Over the course of my research, I have falsified some claims which have left me with a greater conviction that something is truly happening and that we already have enough data to figure it out. It is not just sleep paralysis, OBE, or fantasy, but it is not alien abduction either. People say that research is highly strange and that it is impossible to make conclusions, but those people apparently ignore their nocturnal dreams, therefore are unacquainted with the clearest precedent for ET NHI missing time, which is unremembered dreaming. If the phenomena integrated all phases of consciousness, waking, dreaming, and sleeping, into a singular experience, then its reality must be sustained through the dreaming phase of consciousness. Therefore, the subjective and psychical experience of the phenomena is as real and as meaningful as the physical or censored data level. Valet and Davis offered a 6-layer model of UAP encounters that described both a physical and psychical layer. What if the materialist abduction researchers, like Hopkins, Jacobs, and Mack in 1992, simply could not discern which elements were dreams, confusing the physical and psychical layers of the experience? What if the physical experience of ET-NHI contact was generated in the same way as dreams generate physical seeming experiences? If dreams are relevant to the experience of the phenomena, then the original authoritative reports of abduction and body marks must be interpreted as religious documents akin to scripture. The original authoritative reports, no matter how accurate or scientific, have unconscious authority over our imagination and beliefs, which in turn influences our direct experience of the phenomenon. For example, scoop marks are indentations of the skin that appear as if an instrument scooped out the skin, which people discover but have no memory of wounding. Hopkins presented scoop marks as typical body mark evidence supporting alien abduction. However, I have found them independently described for evidence of reincarnation and witchcraft. The authority of body marks as physical evidence appears to be a function of the social reach of the researchers, not the quality of their science, which is a primary reason to engage the funders of the 1990s abduction research with contemporary NHI encounter research. Upon realizing that alien abduction and body mark evidence may be considered religious or literary documents, the question arises, what was the original authoritative document that associated body marks with alien abduction? The question is important because it may elucidate the cause of the 1990s abduction frenzy, which I personally must address before I can study the phenomena behind the phenomena of ET-NHI encounters. Perhaps others can bypass alien abduction, but I am a child of the 1990s, and my nightmares were scripted by the sensationalist television presentations of alien abduction. If alien abduction is not real, then someone or group of people in this world are responsible for injecting fear into my childhood by presenting alien abduction research as science. Equipped with my new insight, I could now find who was responsible for my fears of alien abduction by finding an original authoritative association of body marks in alien abduction literature. The inquiry to uncover the human conspiracy behind alien abduction was swift and occurred in less than a week using public documents. My first step was to identify that Hopkins was the main authority on physical evidence for the main abduction researchers, primarily because he inspired Jacobs and Mack. Jacobs sought to collect residue and stains from experiencers as described by Rainey, which was noted as inconclusive in the FUFOR reports on the Internet Archives. The authors of Unusual Personal Experiences appear to have relied solely upon Hopkins' scrapbook of weird body marks to justify the claim that puzzling body marks are a key indicator of the UFO abduction syndrome, which in turn was used to justify the physical alien abduction hypothesis to those 100,000 mental health practitioners. While other researchers like Bullard and the Lorenzens noted the connection of individual cases with body marks, I've only found evidence that Hopkins collected photos and considered body marks. I argue that Hopkins was the body mark authority because he carried around a folder of photos and showed them to people, claiming that they may be evidence for alien abduction. Such evidence is much more persuasive, especially to the unconscious, than Bullard's 1987 folklore study of abduction tales, which was a printed text rather than that references other texts, but offered no photos or general study of body marks like Hopkins. Therefore, I argue that Hopkins' collection of puzzling body mark photos was the primary physical evidence by which anomalous body marks became definitively associated with alien abduction through the clinical definitions presented in Unusual Personal Experiences. To this day, body marks continue to be associated with alien abduction, which I track through hundreds of social media posts inquiring about the possibility of abduction due to an unexplained mark. Hopkins alone did not have enough authority to generate the alien abduction frenzy of the 1990s. As a sensationalist mass market author, Hopkins's work is more similar to the Lorenzens' Abducted, which is barely remembered as a precedent for his work, than the credentialed academic work put forward by Jacobs or Mack. Therefore, I argue that the authoritative original report of abduction body marks occurred in collaboration with academics, which established the connection for our entire culture, not just a small group of UFO researchers or enthusiasts. The Roper Poll. I say that the 1992 publication of Unusual Personal Experiences is the authoritative original report that established the connection between alien abduction and body marks for our culture, as well as the notion of alien abduction in general. This document was used by all the abduction researchers to justify their hypothesis to national audience and mental health professionals. It claimed to be sent to nearly 100,000 mental health practitioners by the Bigelow Holding Corporation. I argue that it is the authoritative definition of the alien abduction phenomena that inspired the 1990s fascination with, or perhaps panic about, the subject of abduction. If my traumatizing fear of alien abduction in the 1990s had a cause outside of myself, then this document would be that cause. I argue that its authors, funders, and publishers are responsible for creating the 1990s abduction panic. Given its small role in the memory wars controversies and similar epistemologies, we may expect that the alien abduction panic similarly impacted individuals, families, and society. Further, I argue that its impact may be entrenched like the myth of repressed memory and may require similar research to address, which is why I have crafted a proposal to the original funders of that research. I personally testify that the pseudoscientific definition of the UFO abduction syndrome, which was systematically and intentionally publicized to national audiences, has directly resulted in traumatizing fear that inspired my research journey. Unusual Personal Experiences classified symptoms common to OBEs as the UFO abduction syndrome. Let me read that again. Unusual Personal Experiences classified symptoms common to OBEs as the UFO abduction syndrome. I have personally experienced spontaneous and consciously induced OBEs. I testify that OBEs are a closer fitting model to the indicators used in the report. Further, I testify that the traumatic fear caused by media presentation of alien abduction as scientific, not folklorish or spiritual, phenomena prevented my exploration of this fascinating, inspiring, and natural experience of OBE and NHI contact. I argue that the systematic publication of the UFO abduction syndrome to the mental health community through Unusual Personal Experiences and subsequent conferences and lectures, along with claims based upon it, may have clear and quantifiable impacts for which individuals are responsible. These individuals include 1. John Mack, MD, author of the foreword that associated his credentials with the UFO abduction syndrome, Pulitzer Prize-winning Harvard professor of psychiatry and best-selling author of Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens and Passport to the Cosmos. 2. Bud Hopkins, project director, modern artist, famed abduction researcher, best-selling author of Missing Time, Intruders, and Witnessed. David Jacobs, PhD, project director, Temple University professor of history, best-selling author of Secret Life, The Threat, and Walking Among Us. Ron Westrom, PhD, project researcher and Eastern Michigan University professor of sociology. John Carpenter, MSW, ACSW, LCSW, author of the commentary that argued against the strict psychological interpretation of abduction researcher, and licensed mental health professional. 6. Robert Bigelow, project funder, publisher of the report, wealthy supporter of UFO and life after death researcher, and said to be motivated by a childhood UAP narrative. 7. Hans Adam II, Prince of Liechtenstein, project funder, wealthy anonymous supporter of UFO and energy research, and said to be motivated by childhood UAP narratives. The 64-page booklet is titled Unusual Personal Experiences, subtitled An Analysis of the Data from 3 national surveys conducted by the Roper Organization. The Roper Organization is a polling center that conducts national surveys, generally for marketing, research, or political opinions. The Roper Organization data is now held by a nonprofit institute at Cornell University as an archive of public opinion. The booklet cover is printed in blue and features a line drawing of 6 people wearing business attire looking over a desert landscape. The horizon is indistinct with no clear boundary between earth and sky. The title is bold printed above the horizon in the line drawing, while the subtitle is printed below the frame of the drawing in white text on the blue background. The booklet was copyrighted in 1992 for the Bigelow Holding Corporation in Las Vegas, Nevada. The table of contents outlined the booklet. It began with a note from the publisher, Robert Bigelow. John Mack introduced the UFO abduction syndrome and offered clinical commentary and admonishes mental health professionals to prepare for an influx of clients who may explore the notion of abduction after the airing of a CBS miniseries docudrama in May of that year. Hopkins, Jacobs, and Westrom presented the report through their definition of the UFO abduction syndrome, offering a clinical description and therapy recommendations. The next chapter reprinted the Roper Report on the National Survey. It was followed by discussion and interpretation by Hopkins, Jacobs, and Westrom that argued for the association of the key indicators with UFO abduction, even though the survey did not ask questions about alien abduction. The penultimate chapter was commentary by John Carpenter, who offered his testimony as a credentialed and licensed mental health practitioner as authority for his arguments that the syndrome is a physical reality for which therapists must prepare. Finally, Robert Bigelow discussed his involvement and offered funding to engage mental health professionals. The booklet included a mail-in card to indicate interest in attending a free conference on the phenomenon. I argue that the unusual personal experiences perform 2 functions. First, it reported on data from national surveys by the Roper Organization. The organization's methodologies are well established, and we may assume that their reports are accurate within the margin of errors they report, just as the skeptics accepted the data. The Roper data is interesting in itself on the basis of the questions alone. The survey was repeated by Bigelow in 1998 and by the Sci-Fi Channel in 2002, enabling comparison over time. Second, the booklet defined and promoted the clinical definition of a syndrome outside of the normal process of peer review or scientific orthodoxy, which may be justifiable due to the anomalous nature of the phenomenon. Rather than publish their findings in an academic peer-reviewed journal, the project used the sponsor's significant financial resources to directly engage the mental health community through mailings, lectures, and conferences. The document was used to gather attendees for the 1992 Abduction Study Conference at MIT. Mack, Hopkins, Jacobs, and other members of the abduction research community cited the poll on national television. The Roper poll is titled Unusual Events Survey, which was conducted in 1991, then again in 98 and 2002. As explained in the report, the Roper organization conducted in-home surveys about a broad range of opinions and lifestyles, to which they appended the unusual events survey questions as part of their trademark limo bus service to the trademark Roper reports. Roper originally conducted the survey of 5,947 people over 3 months in the late summer of 1991. They claim a plus or minus 1.4 margin of sampling error. The organization described their polling methodology, which appears to be robust. The organization's polling data is now held at Cornell University as an academic database of public opinion, which suggests its methods are academically acceptable, called the Roper Center for Public Opinion. After the survey results, Hopkins and Jacobs explained the survey design. The unusual events survey asked the respondents to indicate how many times something happened to them. Never, once or twice, or more than twice. The survey focused on indicators of UFO abduction syndrome and direct questions about alien abduction and not about direct questions about abduction, because it was assumed that most respondents would classify their dreamlike memories as alien abduction. Let's start this over. The survey focused on indicators of UFO abduction syndrome and did not ask direct questions about abduction because it was assumed that most respondents would classify their dreamlike memories of abduction as dreams or would be too shy to say. Much of their discussion on focused on survey design in the specific wording of the questions, justifying their use of as key indicators of abduction. For example, the authors emphasize the importance of the word puzzling in the question, do you remember finding puzzling scars on your body? Similarly, the word actually in the question, do you remember feeling that you were actually flying through the air? The emphasis words were supposed to separate true UFO abduction events from merely out-of-body experiences or dreams or wannabe experiences, as Hopkins would later describe them. 5 topics were selected as key indicators of the UFO abduction syndrome. 5 were related topics and 1 question intended to test positive response bias. The questions are 1. Seeing a ghost, 2. Feeling as if you left your body, 3. Seeing a UFO, 4. Waking up paralyzed with a sense of a strange person or presence or something else in the room, key indicator. 5. Feeling that you were actually flying through the air, although you did not know why or how, key indicator. 6. Hearing or seeing the word Trondent and knowing that it has a secret meaning for you. That's a positivity response test. 7. Experience a period of time of an hour or more in which you were apparently lost, but you could not remember why or where you had been. This is a key indicator. 8. Seeing unusual lights or balls of light in a room without knowing what was causing them or where they came from. That's a key indicator. 9. Puzzling scars on your body and neither you nor anyone else remembering how you received them or where you got them. Key indicator. 10. Having seen, or either as a child or an adult, a terrifying figure, which might have been a monster, a witch, a devil, or some other evil figure in your bedroom or closet or somewhere else. Then 11. Having vivid dreams about UFOs. The results of the poll surprised the researchers, which may have inspired their actions to bypass scientific prudence to propagate their findings directly to the mental health community. The percent of respondents who experienced at least one indicator for abduction was around 18%, and with all 5 indicators was around 0.3%. That's 18 people. The authors decided that 4 out of the 5 indicators were sufficient to classify the respondent as a victim of the UFO abduction syndrome, which suggested that around 2% of the survey, that's 101 people of that 6,000, were abductees. The authors conclude that 1 out of every 50 adult Americans may have had a UFO abduction experience, claiming that the survey statistically implies that at least 3.7 million people have been abducted. We must take a moment to discuss the context of this survey in order to understand the drastic response of the stakeholders to directly engage the mental health community. Although the Monroe Institute was founded in 1974, there was no mainstream consensus on OBEs and sleep paralysis. In 1998, Blackmore published an essay in the Skeptical Inquirer exploring the connection of the UFO abduction syndrome with sleep paralysis. Many of her references to sleep paralysis were published after 1991. Earlier studies involved small surveys of undergraduate populations. At that time, dream studies was an extremely small field, as its only professional and academic association, the International Association for the Study of Dreams, was founded in 1983. It is reasonable to assume that researchers may not have seriously heard of sleep paralysis, OBEs, or other exotic consciousness phenomena that may contextualize the key indicators of this survey. Finally, the Roper report included statements from the organization about the survey methodology, summary of results, comparison with known demographic segments, and table of results. While I have already discussed the results, the demographic comparison requires attention. Roper used 11 standardized demographic breakdowns and additional key analysis groups to conclude that influential Americans are significantly more likely than the rest of the population to report all the items on the list. Influentials are defined as trendsetters, better educated, and wealthier than most Americans. It is generally who you want to be, and it turns out you want to be an abductee who has not heard that Trondheim has a secret meaning for your life. The Unusual Events Survey, often called the Roper Report or Poll, forms the center of the Unusual Personal Experiences booklet. It is surrounded by commentary from the project authors, mental health professionals, and a project sponsor. The authorship of some sections is not clear. For example, the analysis of the survey results section immediately follows the Roper-produced results table. Although I have read the booklet several times, I frequently mistook Hopkins and Jacobs for Roper and needed to scan forwards and backwards to discern who was the actual author of the text. While the document reads like a scientific paper or clinical definition of a syndrome, its reference list is extremely sparse. It contains only 6 references to other materials in a bibliography, but not clearly cited in the text. Hopkins and Jacobs each have a book on the list, but neither are clinicians or scientists. Bullard's research appears on the list, but again, he is a folklorist and not a clinician. The only reference that appears clinical is the final report on the psychological testing of UFO abductees by Maccabee, Westrom, Blocher, Clamar, Hopkins, and Slater, which applied a psychological testing to Hopkins' subject to show that they do not suffer from mental disturbances. Critics such as Sirius or Class did not find fault with the poll methods because the organization was credible and effective. However, they found fault with the conclusions, which were supported by appeal to authority claims instead of reference to relevant literature, as one would expect with a clinical definition and therapy recommendations. The major authority claim is based on John Mack, who introduced the booklet with a warning that mental health workers may have an influx of patients inquiring about alien abduction after the intensely promoted CBS miniseries docudrama, which was a science fiction program based on Hopkins's Intruders. Mack concluded his introduction with a recommendation to heed the contents of the book and a personal invitation to a lecture or a conference. John Mack, MD, was a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and professor of Harvard psychiatry. The second major appeal to authority is to John Carpenter, a credentialed and licensed mental health worker, MSW, ACSW, LCSW, who admonishes the reader to take abduction narratives seriously and address concerns about hypnosis, fantasy, and psychological explanation. Class's observation that Mack signed a $200,000 book deal on abductions prior to the publication may be relevant. Hopkins, Jacobs, and Mack all eventually published books that their major publishers described as best-selling. Regardless of validity, they used the apparent credibility of the report to establish their book careers. Mack did not warn therapists about the possibility of alien abduction. Rather, he warned therapists that many of their clients may respond to the suggestion that they were abducted. He warned that their memories may be recovered by watching the fictional mini-series docudrama based upon Hopkins's research. Just like the therapist that caused the incest, sex abuse, recovered memory controversy described by Loftus, the UFO abduction syndrome authors use clinical language to suggest that the traumatic memories of abduction are repressed, but may be recovered through hypnosis or other creative therapy activities. It must be noted that all researchers argued for the physical reality of abduction based upon several factors. First, independent reports of abduction are consistent, although this would be expected if abduction was primarily an OBE or dream. Second, some abduction events are corroborated by witnesses, such as seeing an abductee levitate through the window, which may be explained by a shared dream. Third, the researchers pointed to the massive weight of evidence, both physical and psychological, particularly puzzling scars and residue. However, the only record of physical evidence I have found for abduction is Hopkins's body mark collection and failed tests on residue collected by Jacobs, although Bullard noted that many abduction reports include reference to unexplained body marks. The true alien abduction conspiracy. I argue that the 1992 publication and mailing of Unusual Personal Experiences defined a clinical syndrome and used wealthy sponsorship to intentionally influence mental health practice based upon unfounded and unscientific claims. Up until this publication, most abduction research was mass market or pulp writing and performed by professional or amateur author researchers who had no clinical or mental health training, like the Lorenzens, Fuller, or Hopkins. The fact that the Fund for UFO Research provided a grant for $500 to Bullard, a folklorist in 1987, demonstrates that abduction narratives were like ghost or angel stories rather than clinical symptoms. I argue that the true conspiracy of alien abduction involved Hopkins, Jacobs, Mack, Bigelow, and Lichtenstein, which was not a conspiracy at all because they seemed well-intentioned. However, I say that these people are responsible for the alien abduction frenzy of the 1990s, which obfuscated the study of the phenomenon for decades and may have conditioned a generation to fear natural dreamlike experiences of OBEs, astral projection, and entity visitations. Hypothesis of alien abduction. Before I continue, I must offer some clarifications in my own hypotheses. I am not arguing against the testimony of abductees or against the fact that physical alien abductions may occur. Rather, I hypothesize that an NHI visitation event occurs which may be physically modeled as structured sentient light, such as an orb or light being, and psychically modeled as a shared dream. The NHI has the capacity of a dream shaman, capable of generating and controlling shared dreams. Krippner lists documented dream anomalies, including shared dream precognition and apportation, which is the teleportation of objects from dreams to physical waking reality. In Missing Time Found, I argued that missing time may happen for the same reason that dreams are forgotten, not because of alien not because of alien mind control or repressed trauma. I hypothesize that the dream shamanic skill of dream control, informed by the experience of false awakening, sleep paralysis, and shared dreaming, may explain the lived experience of abductees. Further, I hypothesize that the physical manifestation of NHI as a structured light body capable of radiation may explain body marks and other trace evidences. I am not arguing against other conspiracy theories such as UAP crash recoveries or intelligence community psyops. Rather, I argue that the phenomenon primarily happens through a complex interaction between ontologically distinct NHIs, the collective unconscious, and personal imagination, following Eschborn-Hargen's mutual enactment hypothesis of NHI encounters. I imagine that alien abductions, ET-NHI visitations, or UAP sightings primarily involve the visitation of ontologically distinct NHIs who have been envisioned as fairies, angels, aliens, or spirits. They use their advanced skills of dream shamanism, which the materialist West has persecuted, to generate real and imagined experiences. I hypothesize that the dream shamanic skill of apportation may relate to genetic harvest, animal mutilation, physical abduction, and UAP crashes. While the NHI might physically be zeta reticulans or future humans, they appear to act through a light body that is capable of projecting any form. The light body is both indigenous to the earth and entangled with all that is. And before I continue, I must simply say that the evidence for apportation is pretty much as robust as for alien abduction marks. So the presence of apportation within this document is a rhetoric device and requires further exploration, which I will do in terms of compiling research because it's fascinating and will be illuminative of the phenomenon. All right. Dreams respond to attitudes and intentions, attitudes and suggestions. If the underlying phenomena of the UFO abduction syndrome is a special type of dreaming, then the publication and mailing of unusual personal experiences may be responsible for creating alien abduction experiences in people who would otherwise have less nightmarish yet equally phenomenal NHI encounters. By grounding the phenomena in dream shamanism, I reverse Mac's 4 dimensions of abduction traumata. Mac's traumata are the physically and emotionally intrusive abduction phenomenon themselves, which may have recurred repeatedly during the lifetime of a particular abductee. 2, the personal isolation of the experience the experiencer has undergone, reinforced whenever their communications are misunderstood or treated as a form of strangeness or evidence of mental illness. 3, the shattering of socially agreed upon or consensus definitions of reality, which abductions bring about, and that abductees, like ourselves, must undergo in their confrontation of this phenomena. 4, the fact that the trauma, whatever its source, is not over, i.e. abductees cannot prevent its recurrence or protect their children and other loved ones from its effects. The application of dream shamanism reverses the 4 traumata by framing the NHI encounter within naturally occurring states of consciousness of which the experiencer does have some measure of control. 1. The alien abduction experience is not intrusive. Rather, it arises from within the self like a dream, which may be transformed just as a recurrent nightmare. 2. The alien abduction experience is natural and common when understood as a dream, the sharing of which will likely lead to empathy and insight. 3. The alien abduction experience only shatters the monophasic and materialist definitions of reality by demonstrating that the dreaming phases of consciousness are real. 4. The alien abduction experience may resolve like any dream for the benefit of the individual and their community. I hypothesize that most of the special dreams we call abduction or UAP sightings do involve a physical component. Missing Time Found developed my view that dream shamanism is a primary precedent for alien abduction and regression hypnosis, but does not argue that alien abductions are non-physical. Rather, I observe that dreams may happen through all phases of consciousness and may involve physical components like apportation and body marks. Just as a shared dream between two humans involve two distinct bodies, so too may the shared dream of alien abduction screen memories may involve two distinct bodies, the human body and the NHI light body. I hypothesize that the NHI body physically manifests as structured light that is capable of intentional and immediate transformation of its form or location in spacetime. The NHI body is the light that the experiencers see as tractor beams or orbs. The light seems capable of frequency shifting out of visible spectrum and seems capable of superimposition. The NHI light body seems capable of radiation in the form of visible light, but also perhaps as the radiation that forms crop circles, which may be responsible for some anomalous geometric body marks. The light appears to be entangled with all that is, explaining the mystical nature of its messages, and psychically and physically not and its physically non-local capacities. There are several relevant discussions and precedents for the orb hypothesis. John Ramirez, a former CIA analyst, asserted that the government and intelligence community has sensor data of light orbs. Orbs have responded to HICE invitations. The Phoenix Lights may be the most famous modern example of orb UAPs, while the celestial phenomena over Nuremberg may be the most famous historical example. The Orb Project offered a scientific and religious view of the phenomena. Bledsoe's UFO of God demonstrates the intelligence community's interest with the orb phenomena. Astrophysicists and others have observed self-moving plasmas in the thermosphere that suggest life. Finally, I consider Shaw's description of the luminous bodies associated with Neoplatonic theurgy to be the most explicit and sophisticated discussion of the phenomena to date. Although Shaw likely had no idea his scholarship regarding late antiquity would relate to UAP sightings. Rather than explain the 5 indicators of the UFO abduction syndromes as indicators that something otherworldly happened, which was eventually forgotten due to mind control or trauma repression, what if the 5 indicators described what actually was happening in the alien abduction event? The hypothesis of immaterial yet physical NHI light bodies may order the 5 indicators in a story. 1. Balls of light in the room may happen when an NHI, typically a ball of light orb or other structured light body, visits the experiencer while in an entranced state, like dreaming, driving, or walking, etc. 2. Waking up paralyzed with a sense of strange figure may happen when the NHI engages an OBE-like experience, occasionally waking up the experiencer into the sleep paralysis experience, which is often cited as a transitory state to OBEs. 3. Feeling of actually flying may happen when the NHI and experiencer engage in OBE or astral projection-like experience, which is typically associated with feelings of flying. If dreams are considered real, then the flying must be considered actual. 4. Puzzling scars may happen when some real interaction took place between the NHI and experiencer, perhaps for a variety of reasons. The interaction may be explained through psychosomatic markings like stigmata, or else light body radiations like crop circles. Alternatively, some marks, or perhaps genetic harvest may be explained through apportation. 5. Missing time may happen for the same reasons that dreams are forgotten, not because of alien mind control or trauma repression. Therefore, missing time may be alleviated through the same mechanisms that improve dream recall, namely mindfulness and intention. The story of the abduction research, the story of the abduction study group. I'm trying to read this all through in one sitting, and I want it to be directly on this day because of the dream I had suggesting that the 2 green beings that came from a forest and city are true messages. So I am connected with that energy today, and I need to put my face on these experiences that these considerations that I'm offering for the public to say, hey, yes, actually, I'm standing behind this. I believe this. And I believe that addressing these narratives will lead to a greater understanding of the phenomenon. I actually believe that this reading, this work, this research may help transform an entire aspect of our society. And it may actually provide some clues to those members of this abduction study group that have created a sort of impact that I'm describing. And I want to really stand behind this. And so I'm trying to do a recording all the way through. It's taking a lot longer than I expected, but that's how it goes. So just taking a moment to recenter. Unusual personal experiences may be the single most important document in the definition, and I argue the creation of the alien abduction phenomena as a special type of NHI encounter. The last major events in abduction research before then occurred both in 1987. Hopkins published Intruders as a follow-up to his definitive Missing Time in 1981. Both books are presented from the same informed amateur voice as the Lorenzens' Abducted, and therefore may be interpreted as similar to ghost story seances or pseudoscience. Bullard received a grant of $500, about $1,375 adjusting for inflation, from the Fund for UFO Research for his folklore study of abduction tales. Both researchers testified to the physical reality of abduction, offering the consistency of tales and assertion that there was physical evidence. According to quarterly reports published on the internet, FUFOR frequently had an account balance of less than a few $1,000s until for much of the 1980s. The difference between 1987 and 1992 in abduction research is staggering. In 1987, the FUFOR was earning money through smaller donations and book sales, providing research grants of hundreds or a few $1,000s. In 1987, in 1989, the fund sent a letter to supporters that celebrated funding nearly $50,000 of research, but pleaded for support because they were out of cash. In 1990, they sought to raised $10,000 for the Recollections of Roswell project and received $16,000. According to Bigelow in the Afterwards of Unusual Personal Experiences, he sponsored the 1991 conference with an anonymous donor who decided to fund the Unusual Events Survey. According to swissinfo.ch, the survey cost $200,000, which would be around $455,000 adjusting for inflation. The anonymous donor appears to be Hans Adam II, Prince of Liechtenstein, who also funded the 1992 Abduction Study Conference at MIT. The organizer of the 1992 conference, David Pritchard, apologized to the prince for unwanted publicity in a letter sent January 20th, 1993, now held in the Archives of the Impossible. He wrote, "Your previous financial support of this field is so well known that many people assumed that you were the anonymous donor that we had agreed to refer in the acknowledgments. FUFOR administered $48,000 on behalf of the conference, which is around $109,000 adjusted for inflation. While most other members of the abduction study group were vocal about their activities and opinions, the prince has been relatively quiet. We know that he supported alien abduction research in the 1990s. Richard Hall of FUFOR sent a letter now held at the Archives of the Impossible to the Prince on July 7, 1992, regarding the Abduction Study Conference at MIT, CC'd to David Pritchard and John Mack. He reported on the success of the conference, recommended that a special abduction fund be established, and personally reflected on his own ontological shock. While we do not know what the prince thought, we may deduce that the following reflections from Hall may have been welcomed by the prince. I personally found the contents of the conference very mind-expanding and stimulating, but also rather startling and disturbing in many ways. Up until recently, I have been able to view the matter in the subject in a very detached and objective manner. Now that the apparent literal reality of it is sinking in, due to Budd's important cases with outside witnesses, please see Rainey's article, the global patterns and the credibility of some of my clients, I may have some trouble in the future. Like the victims, as I consider them to be, my conception of reality and my worldview are being shaken, and I have to adjust in some way. Fortunately for me, I have had a lot of preparation, and the adjustment will be easier for me than many people. Still, I got a strong dose of reality, which has not been easy to digest. Another disturbing thing is that a New Age religion of sorts is evidently emerging based on a benign interpretation of the aliens. I agree with Bud that different people manage to cope in different ways, but self-delusion is not a healthy way to cope in the long run, and we certainly don't need New Age notions attached to this already difficult and confusing subject. The only information I could find about Prince's interest in UFOs comes from the diary of famed researcher Jacques Vallée. He documented a visit to Liechtenstein in 1989 in which he discussed the topic of UFOs with the prince. The diary indicated that the prince and his cousins saw UFOs in the 1950s. It also indicated that the prince was exploring propulsion systems related to UFOs with an engineer named George Hathaway. Vallée writes, Hathaway is an engineer, EE, who worked in collaboration with the Planetary Association on Clean Energy, a group that brings back memories of Andrea Puharich, which is a name anyone who has made it this far should know or look up. Vallée also names some of the prince's contacts. Hal Puthoff met Prince Hans Adam. Prince Hans Adam was at the SSE, Science Exploration meeting in Cornell, where the prince argued knowledgeably with Carl Sagan. Interestingly, Vallée wrote that the prince questioned him about whether Vallée believed the phenomenon was physical, to which Vallée responded with an analogy of a movie projector. Just as unusual personal experiences is the single authoritative document that I say define the so-called alien abduction conspiracy, I say that there is one representative document that characterizes this early 1990s abduction research. It is a letter from John Mack to Joseph Coyle of the Department of Psychiatry at McLean Hospital, which was sent on March 23, 1993. It is now held at the Archives of the Impossible. It is in regards to the conferences organized from the responses to the unusual personal experiences mailing. Apparently, Bigelow sent a mailing of invitations to the abduction events to mental health professionals in the personal voice and Harvard stationery of John Mack. In the letter, Mack apologizes for the incident. As we discussed yesterday on the phone, the facts are these. A businessman in Las Vegas who is interested in the abduction phenomena has organized a series of conferences to educate mental health professionals about it. The Atlanta meeting is one of these, and the first one I agreed to attend. This man decided that attendance at the meeting would be enhanced if he sent out invitations from me on my stationery. I was not consulted and would not, of course, have agreed to this. He evidently got a hold of my letterhead, had some stationery printed up, and sent out the invitations. I would never use my name or Harvard Cambridge stationery in this way, and I'm sorry for the embarrassment it may have caused to anyone. This letter, for me, reveals the humanity behind the alien abduction research. The letter shows me how deeply the abduction research group believed in the alien abduction hypothesis because they were willing to take decisive action despite the constraints of a worldview that ridiculed such experiences. I enjoy the liberty to speak about my interest in NHI encounters in my domestic, academic, and professional spaces because of their brave actions. The conspiracy behind alien abduction did not involve aliens, dark cabals, or fantastic elements. Rather, it involved less than 6 men spending and earning large sums of money in shifting public opinion regarding the normal and native psychospiritual phenomena of dreaming and NHI visitation. Their purpose may not have been nefarious. Rather, they simply sought to understand a non-material yet real phenomenon that using concepts available within a materialist worldview. The researchers may have accurately identified key indicators of real encounters that must be explained from a post-materialist perspective because of A, the physical manifestation of the NHI as structured light, and B, the co-creative and non-dual nature of the encounter. They tried to explain NHI encounters from a materialist perspective and were forced to make extraordinary conclusions, which then inspired extraordinary actions. UAP disclosure as an iteration of alien abduction myth. I argue that unusual personal experiences and the UFO abduction syndrome are materialist categories for natural psychospiritual phenomena such as orb and spirit visitation, out-of-body experience, and dream shamanism. Mack eventually opened up to spiritual possibilities in his book, Passport to the Cosmos. Blumenthal documented the shift of abductees to experiencer identities. Clancy speculated that those who believe they have been abducted by aliens do so for religious and spiritual yearnings. Pasulka put forward the hypothesis that the field of UFOlogy is an emergent religion. What happened to the alien abduction study group after the publication of the unusual personal experiences? Mack went on to write 2 books. His first was a $200,000 deal with Scribner, although his legal fees to defend his interests are said to be around $100,000. Hopkins and Jacobs went on to write more books described by their publisher as best-selling. Both were discredited in The Implosion of Abductology by Rainey's article. Westrom continued his career as a sociology professor and served as a consultant to MUFON. Bigelow continued research through the National Institute for Discovery of Science from 1995 to 2004. Bigelow received government money through ATIP for research at Skinwalker Ranch, which sparked the current UAP disclosure conversation through the 2017 New York Times article. The article was co-authored by Hopkins' companion at the time of his death, whom Rainey described as his protege, Leslie Kean, who is interested in the survival of consciousness, just like Bigelow. The other co-author was John Mack's biographer, Ralph Blumenthal. Blumenthal and Kean introduced the UAP whistleblower, David Grush, to the world, sparking the contemporary fascination with UAPs and UAP disclosure. There has been no word about the prince's activities since Vallée published his diaries in 2017 regarding his 1989 sponsorship of UAP and abduction research. What if contemporary UAP disclosure is an iteration of 1990s abduction research? What if crash retrievals and research on the medical effects of encounters are as scientific as Jacobs' abduction residue analysis? If UAP encounters are primarily dream shamanic events, then the recovered UAP metamaterial must be considered an apport. Given that Hopkins' folder of puzzling body marks was the sole source of physical evidence that justified a decade of research under a physical hypothesis, it may not be surprising if the alleged recovered UAP craft were nothing more than spiritualist tricks like the cut gems produced in seances a century before. If UAP disclosure regarding craft recovery is part of the conspiracy, where then is the prince? As we learned from David Pritchard's letter, the prince liked to stay anonymous. As we learned from Vallée's journals, he acts through intermediaries like George Hathaway. Similarly, Bigelow has enacted his research agenda through intermediaries such as Kit Green and Hal Puthoff. In 2011, Michael Ibbotson, a research physicist employed at Hal Puthoff's Institute for Advanced Studies at Austin, and George Hathaway, wrote a paper suggesting the use of dream telepathy for SETI research titled SETI by Entanglement. The paper gives credit to Kit Green and Hal Puthoff for useful suggestions. The paper proposes an experiment similar to Project Stargate, the CIA remote viewing program. It recommended the use of geometry to authenticate ETNHI dream telepathy, which is the only peer-reviewed paper on the subject and overlaps with my research. Upon inquiry about the paper's context, Ibbotson revealed that the paper was written as part of a failed funding proposal. All the contributors to the paper were directly funded by the Prince or Bigelow, and all but one were said to direct research on their funders' behalf. My primary interest in geometric communications was secondary in the paper to the identification of a crash site of a UFO. While these facts cannot prove that Bigelow and the prince are still working together, they seem to be key indicators. If the proposal is in earnest, then we may deduce that Bigelow and the prince do not yet know how to find UFOs or communicate with ETs in 2011. We know that the prince was interested in crash retrievals because of his support of the Recollections of Roswell project. What if the entire UAP crash recovery narrative arises from similar efforts to the 1990s abduction research because it involves the same players? Then we may expect that the same level of physical evidence for physical craft to be similar to the level of physical evidence we have for physical alien abduction. The assertion does not deny the reality of crashed UAPs, retrievals, or metamaterials. Rather, the similarity of alien abduction and UAP crash retrieval narratives may explain why the field is highly strange and why we have limited physical evidence for UAP craft. Legacy calculations. Unusual personal experiences calculated the impact of the UFO abduction syndrome by defining rates of occurrence within populations. They concluded that 2% of the sample experienced the syndrome and extrapolated that 3.7 million Americans may be abductees, therefore justifying their extraordinary actions to mail the booklet to 100,000 mental health professionals, organize lectures and conferences, and coordinate further research to support the researchers' experiences on national television through the 1990s. It must be noted that Bigelow repeated unusual personal experiences in 1998 with an explicit question about alien abduction and received only 3 reports out of 2009. That is 0.15% of the sample. There are several prevalence rates that may be relevant to the calculation. Bullard observed that only several hundred abduction reports were known at the time of his study. A word search of updb.app, a database compiled from archives of many UFO reporting centers from as early as mid-20th century, reveals that the annual rate of reports containing the word abduction is less than 200, with a total of around 3,961 of 336,000. That's about 1%. The lifetime prevalence rates of schizotypy appears to be about 4%, which Clancy associated with abductees. Around 2 to 4% of people are classified as fantasy prone, which is a personality characteristic associated with belief in alien abduction narratives and is a component of schizotypy. In a study of 1,666 dreams, Faith and Krippner classified around 8% as exotic, with 1.4 containing out-of-body elements and about 1.1% containing visitation dreams, like alien abduction. In general, people seem to remember 3 to 4 dreams a week, but have many dreams throughout the night. A survey of typical dream themes agree with the unusual events survey, revealing that around 6.5% of people have dreamed of an alien and 4.5% dreamed of a UFO at least once in their life. Therapists see between 15 to 30 or so clients in a full caseload, which we may estimate at 20 clients per therapist. If all 100,000 professionals read and believed the document, then 2 million people in therapy may have received the suggestion that their natural dreams and NHI encounters were unnatural and traumatic. If only 2% of therapists believe the reports, which is the lower estimate of fantasy proneness, then 40,000 clients received the suggestion. If only 2% of those clients believe the suggestion, then 800 may have been directly impacted by the suggestion of UFO abduction syndrome. It appears that people naturally have out-of-body experiences and visitation dreams. I argued that alien abduction involved co-creation of lived experience such that the screen memory of the encounter is generated in part from the personal imagination. The legacy may be calculated by estimating the number of NHI visitation dreams that contain elements from media informed by the UFO abduction syndrome. I argue that the alien abduction narrative saturated the population of the USA by 1997, as demonstrated by the box office success of Men in Black. The population of the USA in 1997 was 270 million, multiplied by 2% either for abduction or fantasy proneness rates yield 5.4 million people who may be impacted by the UFO abduction syndrome. On average, people remember 3 dreams a week, yielding 156 recalled dreams per year, assuming that 1% of them had 1% of them involved an entity visitation, and 63% of those had a telepathic quality, then it may be estimated that 5.3 million encounters in 1997 in the USA were impacted by the UFO abduction syndrome. If the purpose of NHI visitation is to inspire technical, philosophic, or scientific creativity, then the actions of the UFO abduction study group may have obscured 5.3 million innovations, likely regarding the topics of environmental responsibility, free energy, and the power of consciousness. There were 22.2 million children aged 6 through 11 like me in 1992. Multiplied by the 2% rate of either fantasy proneness or alien abduction yields 444,000 children that were likely impacted by the UFO abduction syndrome. If only 1% of these children experience NHI visitation, then we may estimate that 4,440 interactions between human children and NHIs were directly influenced by the abduction study group. Given that it has taken me 2 decades and the continual assistance of dream NHIs to trace this story, I wonder what would have been possible if the researchers informed us of the positive and empowering aspects of NHI encounters through dreams and OBEs, rather than the solely negative and disempowering aspects of alien abduction. Another method to estimate the legacy of UFO abduction syndrome is to account Amazon.com book reviews of the major researchers' books, Hopkins, Jacobs, and Mack. At the time of writing, their books received a total of 3,058 reviews on Amazon. For context, Pasolka's American Cosmic, published in 2019, received 1,164 reviews. All publishers of the abduction researchers described them as best-selling, while Pasolka's did not. Therefore, we may assume that the historic reach of the researchers is much greater than implied by current reviews. Estimates for purchase-to-review ratios are varied from 1 to 10 to 1 in 200 or more. Assuming that 1 in 20 left a review, this represents 61,000 people who have worked with their books, bought their books. The USGAO estimated that there are 1.2 million behavioral professionals in the US, which gives a rate of 0.3% of the population. Therefore, we may estimate that 183 behavioral health professionals have read one of the major researchers' books since Amazon implemented its review system in 2004, which in turn may have directly impacted their caseload of 3.6 thousand clients. Multiplying the abduction/fantasy proneness rate of 2% yields 73 individuals who may have had a traumatizing abduction instead of a more natural NHI visitation event. While this number may seem trivial, it must be noted that Bigelow and the Prince are only 2 individuals motivated by their UAP, not apparently abduction experiences. How might they have impacted the world if their childhood UAP narratives involved traumatizing fear instead of inspiring mystery? The entire scope of their impact may be estimated using the 2% abduction or fantasy proneness rate multiplied by the ratio of remembered to unremembered dreams, about 10%, multiplied by the 1% rate of exotic dream visitations, and further multiplied by the 63% hit rate of telepathic dream experiments. The population of the U.S. around 1992 was around 257 million. 5.14 million people may be abductees or fantasy prone. Each person may have recalled 150 dreams per year, with an estimate of 1.5 exotic visitation dreams. Unusual Personal Experiences was published in 1992, while Loftus's Myths of Repressed Memory was published in 1994. The argument which was applied to alien abduction by Lynn and Kirsch in 1996. We may estimate that 3 years passed before major scholarly arguments against alien abduction could permeate the culture. Therefore, we may estimate that 14.5 million dreams, that's 257 million people times 2% times 1.5 times 63% times 3 years, we may estimate that there were 14.5 million dreams impacted. This figure represents 14.5 million interactions between humanity and NHIs that could have resulted in inspiring and technical could have resulted in inspiration of technical, political, scientific, or artistic inspiration, but have resulted in traumatizing fear due to the actions of the abduction study group. I argued that the contemporary UAP crash retrieval narrative is an iteration of the 1990s abduction study group. It appears that Bigelow and the Prince considered funding dream telepathy to identify the location of crashed UFOs in 2011. It appears that both journalists who introduced the UFO whistleblower have direct ties to this group. Kean is connected through her companionship and her alleged training by Hopkins. Blumenthal is connected to Mack through his biography. Both are connected to Bigelow through the 2017 New York Times article. It is difficult to estimate the impact of the UAP crash narrative on culture because we are living through it. I hypothesize that UAP crash retrievals may be nothing more than elaborate examples of the spiritualist phenomena of Apors, meaning that their physical manifestation may be physically real, but that their presence in our world follows the same rules as dreams. If the underlying phenomena of ETNH contact is primarily psychical, mental, or based in dreams, then the media narrative surrounding crash retrievals may simply be a distraction to understanding and engaging the true phenomenon. Another way to quantify the legacy of the abduction study group is to imagine what may have been possible if the researchers engaged in a campaign to explore the phenomena through lucid dreaming rather than propagate disempowering fear. If the phenomena is primarily dream, then it may respond to lucid dream intentions. Lucid dreams are dreams that involve the awareness of dreaming along with some degree of control. Lucid dreams are often connected with OBE, sleep paralysis, and entity visitation. Dream researchers Raduga et al. Used lucid dreaming to emulate ETNHI encounters, with about 74% of participants successfully emulating a visitation or abduction dream. In an online survey of lucid dreamers, Stumbres et al. Found that lucid dreamers had around 3.5 lucid dreams a month and accomplished their intentions about 48% of the time. If the abduction study group focused on lucid dreams, OBEs, and NHI visitation phenomena education instead of fearful alien abduction narratives in their mailings and conferences, how many NHI encounters may have naturally occurred in 1 year? Assuming that their campaign reached market saturation in 1997, the calculation begins with 270 million Americans. The rate for fantasy proneness or abduction is 2%, giving 5.4 million. A common application of lucid dreaming is training, visualization, and practice for a skill. Erlacher et al. Observed that 24% of a sample of German athletes are frequent lucid dreamers, and 9% use lucid dreaming to practice sports. Therefore, we may estimate that 20% of NHI dreamers use lucid dreams, giving 1.8 million. Over the year, they may have 38.8 million lucid dreams. 3 a month over 12 months. They might achieve their lucid intent 48% of the time, giving 1.8 million lucid dreams that accomplished an intent. Applying the visitation rate dream gives, I think this calculation is wrong, to be honest, but I'll read it through and then update the text. It is likely wrong by an order of magnitude because we have 38 million lucid dreams a year, and then we're applying the 48% lucid intent, giving around 20 million lucid dreams that could have accomplished an intent. Applying the visitation dream rate of 1%, that's 1% of 20 million, then we would have that to give the final number of lucid dreams that may have responded to an intent that the abduction study group could have engaged lucid dreamers with instead of scaring them. So the legacy of abduction study group may be calculated as lost opportunity. It has been 32 years since the publication of Unusual Personal Experiences. I'm just making a note to... Okay. So I write there, it has been 32 years since the publication of unusual personal experiences, giving possible 377,000 encounters, which is the total magnitude of all the UFO Reporting Center's databases. Unlike UFO reports, intentional lucid dream experiments generate knowledge and understanding in themselves. The UFO reports represent puzzles, while the dream reports may represent solutions. What innovations and discoveries were lost because the abduction study group was afraid of the New Age and its dreams, ESP, and OBEs? Conclusion. In summary, I have argued for several points. First, alien abduction may be a natural dreamlike phenomenon involving real encounters with NHIs. Second, I hypothesize that the NHIs physically act through a structured light body, often called an orb, that is capable of both radiation and advanced dream shamanic feats. The lived experience of abductions are co-created like dreams, while genetic harvest or teleportation of bodies may be explained through apportation. Bodies and earthmarks, the only evidence for physical abductions, may be explained as a result of psychosomatic processes or radiation of the NHI light body. Third, I argued that unusual personal experiences was the original and authoritative declaration of the UFO abduction syndrome, which sparked the alien abduction frenzy that associated fear and terror of natural dream experiences for a generation. Finally, I argued that the real conspiracy behind alien abduction involved the extraordinary efforts of wealthy sponsors and best-selling author researchers. Further, I argued that there was no alien abduction conspiracy because they appeared to be well-intentioned, and their actions appeared to be brave in the context of the materialist worldview. The direct actions of Mack, Hopkins, Jacobs, Bigelow, and the Prince, and those who trusted their research, are the reason why I was afraid of alien abduction. I was unnaturally afraid of alien abduction. I personally believe that the underlying phenomena is still NHI contact, but not alien abduction per se, although it may involve co-created themes of abduction. I do not believe they are ET doctors from Zeta Reticuli or the future. Rather, they are indigenous Earth consciousness that sometimes expresses as a light orb, but always expresses through shared dream, whether or not you missed the time. Their media propaganda inspired such fear of the phenomenon that I am only now becoming aware of the significance of their actions. What may have been discovered in the 3 decades since 1991 if we knew what we were looking for and not afraid of it? The legacy of the 1990s abduction study group, however well-intentioned, may be felt in the media narrative surrounding UAP disclosure, whistleblowers, and alleged craft recovery. What could we discover if we knew what we were looking for? What if Bigelow, the Prince, and all those who followed them are looking in the wrong direction? Science, not religion; matter, not spirit; metamaterials, not encounters; waking, not dreaming, and so on. In conclusion, I will allow myself some personal speculation about personal motivations. I expected to discover nefarious conspiracies involving intelligence community psyops or strange interspecies politics involved with extraterrestrials. Instead, I discovered that half a dozen motivated and resourced individuals crafted and fueled the alien abduction panic in the same way that the recovered memory specialists fueled the memory wars controversies and satanic panics, all following the same pattern as medieval witch hunting. It seems that all parties were earnestly engaged in solving the paradoxes presenting to them. Both Bigelow and the Prince are said to be passionately motivated to understand their own UAP encounter narratives. All the researchers believed experiencers when no one else would. Personally, I interpret the entire history as a demonstration of the absurdity of the materialist perspective that rejected notions of angels, fairies, and light beings in the first place. Personally, I commend the bravery of those within the materialist paradigm who have funded and engaged research on the topics, such as Prince, Bigelow, Mack, Jacobs, and Hopkins. I brought awareness to the abduction study group because I believe that two transformations will be accomplished. First, I hope that the power of the alien abduction narrative to create fear and terror about natural spiritual experiences will be diminished so that the next generation of shamanic dreamers will move towards the NHI luminous body with the confidence and dignity befitting our humanity. Second, I hope that the research community stops looking for physical craft as proof for NHI encounters. Rather, I hope that they engage the NHIs in conversation befitting their role in supporting humanity on the earth. There is truly a phenomenon underlying alien abduction and UAP craft. It physically manifests as structured light, it psychically manifests through co-creative shared dreaming, and it is native to the earth. We have interacted with it in the guise of angels, fairies, ancestors, and otherworldly visitors since before history. Once we see the long tradition of NHI encounters through the traditions of angels, spirits, fairies, and daemons, we may realize that crashed UAPs are simply a gift from the fairies, gold that will turn to coal. What if the Prince and Bigelow funded research that directly engaged the deepest reality of the phenomenon, not just its materialist projections? SETI, by entanglement, proposed dream telepathy as a means to discover the crash site of a UFO likely to Bigelow, the Prince, or both. I am one of many in a supply of subjects who claim to be in telepathic contact with extraterrestrials and who are willing to carry out tests. I have engaged in dream telepathy with an NHI dream character who I call Galathog the Grey. It has instructed me in the oracular art and science of geometry and has guided my inquiry, leading me to discover the impacts of Bigelow and the Prince's quest to find physical ETs and UFOs. We, both me and Galathog, say that the quest for crashed UFOs is as quixotic and absurd as alien abduction, although we both affirm our belief in their physical reality. We say that the crashed UFO is a trick, like a screen memory. Galathog says that the NHIs will not show you to a crash site, but would be happy to share enough inspiration, intuition, and wisdom for us to build whatever we dream. We also say that there truly is a phenomenon of encounters with ontologically distinct NHIs who may move forward our technological dreams. The history of philosophy, science, and technology involves direct inspiration from mystical realities such as dreams of mathematically instructive angels. If Bigelow and the Prince funded research that directly engaged the NHIs, then we might expect the generation of wisdom alongside knowledge and the empowerment and empowered relationships with NHIs instead of traumatizing victimization. If our, Galathog and mine, hypothesis is accurate, then in 30 years humanity will enjoy a cultural and scientific renaissance through collaboration with its closest neighbors to the stars. Bigelow and the Prince spent at least $250,000 in the early 1990s supporting abduction research to powerfully establish the UFO abduction syndrome as a mental health fact. They performed social science by commissioning the Roper poll that actually demonstrated that there may be NHI contact phenomena related to dreams, OBEs, and light. They performed pseudoscience when they jumped to conclusion that 2% of the population were abductees based upon the uncredentialed or reviewed assertions of Hopkins, a modern artist, and Jacobs, a history professor. The only supporting physical evidence was a folder of weird body marks, some of which are now explained as rare physical accident. The stakeholders may literally have performed a conspiracy through their secretive actions, mostly to protect the Prince's anonymity, to inform the mental health community about their findings. if they had any other motive than to naively share the results of their study. Let me repeat that. If the group had any other motive than to naively share the results of their study with the mental health community, then we must understand this to be a conspiracy with intent to cause harm. But I have read the documents, I have kind of contemplated this, and I will advocate for the notion that it was a sort of naive reaction from materialist perspective about a non-material phenomenon. The impact of their work may be modeled and quantified through research using the precedents of the memory wars controversy and the prevalence of schizotypy. Adjusting for inflation in 2024, the value of their sponsorship would be close to $560,000. On behalf of my NHI dreams, I produced a proposal to establish the D-SETI Research Institute over 5 years for $550,000 in 2022. I did not really send it to anyone. It just sort of went in a file. And then this came up and I go, oh, well, we'll actually see what happens. Let's see what happens. In response to the invitation at the end of Unusual Personal Experiences to fund the engagement of mental health professionals, I updated the proposal to $595,000 to include a specific program to A, elucidate the phenomena underlying the UFO abduction syndrome through my PhD dissertation, which is in an accredited institution and will be defended according to orthodox academic principles, right? This can be some of the first real knowledge that we define on the phenomenon. And B, to engage mental health professionals regarding the phenomenon after the establishment of defended public knowledge, right? So rather than act quickly, I propose to study the phenomena within academia and then to engage professionals only after a successful dissertation defense of our new knowledge of the phenomena. The proposal would fund my PhD work, which is currently self-funded through donations I receive for my DreamWorks services, as well as some contract work I do on the web. And I'm going half-time and would love to go full-time, but this field is weird and has been full of confusion because of these individuals, so I would love their help in actually making some sense of this within a context of an accredited PhD program to produce knowledge that is defensible. All right, the proposal would fund my PhD work, which is explicitly focused on research regarding ET-NHI contact and dream within an accredited institution. It would fund education and training on the empowered view that ET-NHI encounters are natural and that their experiences that the experiences are empowered participants. It would fund the massive collection and analysis of dreams, ET-NHI encounters, and UAP sightings, of which I have several functional examples online involving many thousands of reports. Additionally, it would fund coordinated dream experiments with citizen science researchers with the aim of conversation and relationship with NHIs, not the extraction of knowledge or technology per se, although both will be a side effect, perhaps even a hitchhiker. Finally, it would fund a public relations education campaign with mental health professionals to address the legacy of the UFO abduction syndrome. I would look directly at the phenomenon, the unusual events survey measured without the mediating and unnatural concept of alien abduction. Personally, I make the choice that the legacy of the abduction study group is not the harm caused by their extraordinary conclusions. Rather, I choose that their legacy is a measurement and discovery of an incredible NHI visitation phenomena associated with sentient light and dreams. I believe that we can dream up a better story than alien abduction. I dream that we transform the legacy of alien abduction research to empower relationships with NHIs that inspire scientific and cultural renaissance. All right, so these are the references. You just sort of look at these. Right? This is page 2 of references, page 3 of references, page 4 of references, page 5 of references, page 6 of references, page 7 of references, page 8 of references, and there we go. So I just wanted to share that with you in addition to, let me show you this again. So we start with the analysis of Bud Hopkins' third eye. This is a pedagogical claim, and I have 2 observations around that geometrically. And so this is what, like page 159 all the way to here, which is like page 238. So what's that? 90 some pages of figures of body marks and UAP documentation. That's that. I mean, I'm putting together research that's actual research. This is the physical evidence. This is the physical evidence for alien abduction, as best as I can tell. But it's not actually. I didn't collect it as evidence for physical alien abduction. I collected it because people say, this is an anomalous geometric body mark, and this is actually associated with intuitions of extraterrestrial contact. People do believe that. They have that intuition. They're smart. They believe in it for a reason. And I'm also an experiencer. Look at these dots in a line. They have geometry. They were strange. They sent me on this experience. So I just want to share that. I'm really authentically looking into it. And this is another thing, right? Like here's one. I mean, I actually put forward a number of strange hypotheses associated with these, like perhaps interdimensional light beings are causing them. I don't know, but I think we, like this one in particular, I go, this may actually be an artifact, an impression of the technology used to make that mark, as if the mark maker just set down the thing that they were using to make that mark on the skin, and it sort of left a mark. And I go, oh wow, that seems relevant to me. So I just wanted to share that, because I'm not debunking all of this. I'm just saying there's something else going on. So like I said, this is a strange presentation. Like I said, this is important for me to record today because my dreams told me to, because the green men would authenticate the message, a message as true. I believe that's John Greenstreet in the Greenwald authenticating the message that there is a UAP religion conspiracy theory thing. That I'm looking into, like, oh, okay, they've seen it too. So I just wanted to share that book, Galathog the Greys. And then I also want to share this other one, the D-SETI Research Institute proposal. Is supported by my academic papers in this booklet and a trilogy of books. This is a new book I'm working on. It is dedicated to the Prince of Liechtenstein and Bigelow for their research, actually. I'm saying I've raised some concerns, right? I go, hey, this looks like a UFO religion conspiracy. But guess what? I'm a UFO prophet. So why don't we work together? And I'm also a researcher within an accredited institute that has an education in the philosophy and science and really just wants to see claims, extraordinary claims related to these dream phenomena that may actually impact those dream phenomena. I really want those to be grounded in science and the traditions that have actually studied these phenomena. So I think we can actually work together to operationalize dream telepathies. You can ask all the questions you want about locations of crashed UFOs on the side while I'm asking about geometric intuitions, and maybe we'll get somewhere. We'll see. But we actually need to study dreams and dream telepathy and NHI encounters and all of these things within the means of scientific endeavor and philosophical endeavor that is kind of standard to our culture. So that's really what this dedication is about. So I just wanted to show you that and be really transparent, right? Like I have written that one article, right? This one article, the Abduction Study Legacy Program. That chapter is a justification of this 30-page proposal I'm making, I made this proposal a year ago. I haven't found anyone that wanted to really fund it, and I sort of gave up. And then I read this booklet. I go, okay, in 1992, they were willing to engage mental health practitioners on this subject. I'm not a licensed like therapist, but I have a degree in psychology, and I most certainly will engage them. I love working workshops and teaching and lectures. And why don't we define some knowledge together within the context of an accredited PhD program to study the phenomena actually measured in the unusual surveys events, and then publicize that to 100,000 mental health practitioners, also establishing a sort of lucid dream experimentation methodology at the same time, and let's see what we can do. And it probably take 5 years of patient work, and that's really what this proposal is about. We'll see how it goes. I actually like the literature of dedicating this to the Prince and Bigelow. So even if they don't get back to me, I'm going to leave it. I think it's important. So, like I said, this is all backed up by a lot, and I'm just kind of showing you the table of contents of this book, which are my academic papers, and let's show off this. I'm kind of proud of. I'm definitely proud of these. Because people talk about data, like, is there data for this? Is there evidence for this? And it's like, actually, we put together, my team at Dreamwell and I put together a database of 125,000 dreams, sort of representative sample. And we kind of looked in and it was like, what is the shape and size of UFO dreams? Well, it involves a lot of sleep paralysis and lucid dreams. Guess what? And what else? It involves more natural places than normal and more fantastic beings, of course. And then we can compare that with aliens. Wow, actually less sleep paralysis than lucid dreams and more transportation, and there's more different dimensions here. And what are those elements? Those are fun and fear down here, right? Oh wow, actually grief and sorrow is huge for angels, right? So we have these charts to really compare and work with, and I've it just sort of can do that with this data set. And here's another data set as a prototype. This pulls together 175,000 narratives across multiple different experience types and just compares them, and it does so in a statistically meaningful way based on dream content analysis studies. So you can go, what are the difference between UFO light UFOs and triangle UFO reports? And you go, well, actually, it is statistically significant that choice is involved more with triangle craft than light craft. And same thing here. I looked at 7,000 reports of human-initiated contact with about 800 full-text reports to produce these graphics that compare the sentiment, the emotional quality of those human-initiated contact reports with normal UAP sightings. So there's a lot we can do here. There's a lot of research that wants to happen, but it will not happen if we pseudoscientifically rely upon the UFO abduction syndrome or these weird body marks to justify our research. And I say weird body marks, I don't even mean if there's an associated with a dream of contact, I say that's actually meaningful in and of itself, even if it is bed bugs. That's my own resolution of this story. So with that, let's just come into some conclusion. If you're here with me, thanks for being here. I'm not expecting anyone to watch this all the way through. This was actually simply a sort of shamanic activity of showing my face in a public space to bring these claims, to bring my research publicly. I'm not going to do it behind a published book, although I have included, I'm including I'm doing it through a candid way. You can see I'm tired from reading this. I'm tired from writing this. There were typos in my work. I need to correct it. You need to go through and validate a lot of your own experiences or use discernment in these things. But I'm pointing to a long-standing kind of pattern that I've seen since the 1990s that has personally impacted me, the alien abduction narrative. And I'm going to specifically call for anyone who's watching this or anyone who engages in my work to take a different path than duality. And, it will become very easy to say, oh, the UFO religion conspiracy, those guys, Grush, or whoever is controlling him is a bad person, or like they're like, this is ridiculous, or like there's conspiracies. And I'm actually going to do what my wife has done for me, which is say, let's actually look at the humanity there. Let's actually look at be empathetic, to imagine what it might be like to be them, to kind of think to yourself, well, your perspective now developed out of older perspectives that have shifted and transformed to find you to be where you're at now, and will likely again shift and transform. And so in that way, to demonize or alienate another human being, another member of our human family, because they hold a different religious view than you, even if that religious view is based on the notion of space poltergeists or dinosaur beavers or other ridiculous things that Greenstreet has accurately pointed out are central to the UAP disclosure narrative. Even if those religions involve things that you find ridiculous, those are still someone else's religious spiritual experiences, and we can bring a higher level of dialogue to encountering that and talking about that without engaging in religious war. Basically, let's not do that, because we've had a history of religious wars that really are actually simply just control mechanisms that make rich people rich and poor people dead. So let's not do that. Let's do something else. Let's do something completely different. One of the most impactful things I've discovered about hypnosis, as an experiencer, as someone who's gone through hypnosis, as someone who offers hypnosis in this theoretic framework as spiritual counseling and as dream shamanism. The most impactful thing I have found in the hypnosis experience is not its capacity to help recovered memory or encounter aliens. I just released my own channeling of Galathog through the so-called missing time regression I had to my missing time event, right? It's not that. It is the capacity to have a creative experience. So my first regression experience happened on a solar eclipse. It was really cool. It was synchronistic. I went to a past life and I got stuck, actually. I didn't know what to do. I was scared of dying or something. There was a complex. And the hypnotist just said, imagine some light. Just imagine that light, so loving, so knowledgeable, so wise, just coming into the space. And based on her suggestion, I was able to imagine light come into the space, and that illuminated my emotional world inside, that allowed me to move forward with the past life regression, which did generate meaning and wisdom, although it did not necessarily generate physical evidence that I was so-and-so in a past life. It was a means to inject spiritual creativity in a place where I was stuck, and I needed that dyadic relationship with a practitioner to bring that creativity to places I was stuck. And so I find that the demonization of hypnosis, or like these things, like we need to inject this light and love and another creative solution. It's not they're right or they're wrong. It's both and something else is going on. And so that's why I really challenged myself to look at the results of the unusual events survey as accurate, right? We're not talking about wrong data. We're talking about inaccurate conclusions. And they're not necessarily even, the abduction hypothesis wasn't necessarily wildly inaccurate. It just got a few things wrong that we really needed to get right. And we're just getting right. I believe now. I mean, I believe that this whole notion or whole growing awareness that UFOlogy is something like a religion, I believe that that's helpful for us. So, with that, I will once again thank you for your presence and persistence in being with me as I have gone through this more or less dream shamanic activity of bringing the results of my dream telepathy experiments and dream work experience into a public space to speak out loud these observations that do name individuals, right? I don't want to just go like, I don't want to be a cheap debunker. I don't want to be like an angry Redditor or whatever. I actually want to say these things to the face of all of those individuals I named who I believe are personally responsible for traumatizing me as a little boy, who had extraordinary dream experiences but needed to interpret those through the lens of alien abduction. So I would speak those to their face. I would speak these criticisms to their face because I believe that they can handle it, and I believe that they are actually interested in the phenomena and are wanting to study it as best they can, and are victims, like all of us, of this alienating worldview of materialism through which we've alienated the earth so that we can extract materials out of them, which may explain why real estate developers have a really hard time figuring out what's going on at Skinwalker, right? Like, because of that inherent relationship they have that's extractive or transformative to the earth, that may actually represent a state of mind that is responding, is wanting to respond to spiritual yearnings, but must actually deal with the ghosts and demons of their activities in this world against like the ecology or whatever. So that might be an exploration. I don't know. I'm just riffing at this point. So thank you. And I really do hope that you leave this presentation with a sense of empowerment to really adopt whatever identity you want, whether it is abductee, contactee, experiencer, and you feel empowered to stay within that because of your own experience and not because of what an expert has said 20 years ago or 30 years ago, or not what news media is saying now about spy balloons or strange footage of sensor anomalies, but rather that you really are empowered in yourself to decide your identity in this encounter and to decide what you want to negotiate for in these interactions with non-human intelligences, which often do occur through dreams. So I really do pray and hope that you imagine, creatively imagine, so much love, so much light, so much technical inspiration, scientific innovation, that we can really work together as a people, work together as a gigantic community of human and non-human intelligences to really transform our society to be one of that's harmonious, that is based on principles of love and non-harm and ecological responsibility. So with that, thank you, and may you dream well.